church in Hawthorne?
Growing up in the church in Hawthorne, well, you know, the church in Hawthorne was interesting. First of all, the building was right across from the high school, straight across, and it was made out of 3 different buildings that had been used as construction offices during the time when the military base was being originally constructed. And the church members had gotten together and bought 3 of these buildings and then put them together in kind of a funny fashion, but it made a church. And the interesting thing about church members there is that I think we made up about 10 or 15% of the population of the town, or people that were members of the church. But you're either going to be a good member and go all the time, or you didn't go at all. It seemed like it was a black and white choice. And those that didn't go were Jack Mormons, and those that did go were faithful. And it was a good experience in so many ways. But I remember so many things. In primary, Helen Lofton was our primary teacher forever and ever and ever. She had this long, beautiful, honey blonde hair, and she had, I think, had grown up in Hawaii or something, but she always loved this long, beautiful hair, and even though she was, you know, in her 50s or 60s by the time I knew her, she was still wearing this hair really long. And she seemed like she did everything in primary. She was the primary president, and she directed the music, and, you know, did the music time and did the sharing time, and she just did almost everything in primary. We had primary teachers, of course, but you sure couldn't forget Helen Lofton doing all the things that she did with that primary. And then when I was baptized, the baptismal font was in the floor of the junior primary room.
Junior Sunday school room.
Junior Sunday school room. And so what would happen is when baptisms were to come along, a couple of people, strong people, had come along and lift this lid off the floor, which would have been about 6 feet long by about 4.5 feet wide.
Section of flooring,
and take it out, and that would reveal the font. And then there was no hot water for the font, and so what we'd do is have milk cans, and not very many people know what milk cans are anymore, but they would hold about 10 gallons of milk in the good old days, and they were made out of stainless steel or something, or aluminum. And everybody from their home hot water heater would grab some of these milk cans that were kept just for that purpose and fill up these milk cans with their hot water, bring it to the church, and dump it in the font. Now, I don't know if they always had to do that or it was just when I was baptized, but when I was baptized they had to do that. It's possible that the hot water heater at the church was capable of doing some or all of that, but when I was baptized we had to bring the water from home. And anyway, you get baptized right there, and then go into the chapel right after that. Now, the chapel is also our multi-purpose room. I mean, when you walk in the church, you'd come in a foyer and then turn left and go in the chapel, and the chairs were all folding chairs, so that when there was a dance, then all the chairs would be folded away, and that would be our dance floor. Or when there was a play, you'd set up the floors, take all the chairs away, and make it available for anyway, the podium was kind of unique too, where the bishopric would sit and the choir and whatnot. It was raised up about maybe just 2 feet from the rest of the floor in that room, and the podium was built such that it had long stakes, long metal stakes in the bottom of it. And when it was time to have a play, this rostrum unit that was about 16 or 20 feet long would all, 3 or 4 people would come along and pick that straight up, and the stakes would come out of their holes, and the whole podium and rostrum and everything would come away, and there we had our stage, and had curtains and whatever, and that's how we did plays. And so it was an interesting building. Scouts was held in the basement, which was really just a furnace room, where the hot water heater and the furnace was. Just cement floor, go down the steps and down the basement, and make it fit about, well, our troops sometimes had 32 boys in it, so we were down in pretty cramped quarters, frankly. But it was warm because the furnace was down there.
Well, how is it you developed a positive feeling about going to church?
Well, I think I was positive about church because my parents were, for sure. I mean, they were very active in the church. My dad was a ward missionary a number of times. He was a 70 a number of times. He loved to work in the church and loved to speak in the church. And my mother was a Sunday school teacher frequently, or a gospel doctrine teacher, or she led the music as a chorister and directed the choir a lot, did both of those jobs. So they were active and I was active, and it's where I learned how to sing. I enjoyed learning how to sing in church. I enjoyed the activities. I enjoyed primary. I think I just enjoyed everything about it. And so I think I gained a testimony slowly over a long period of time. But it was an awful lot of fun to go to church, and I very much enjoyed it. And as I was getting older, I served in many youth leadership positions. I think I served in every presidency that was possible to serve in, and enjoyed every minute of it, and gave many talks. I learned how to speak in public by giving numerous talks in church. Our children today don't give 10% of the talks that I gave, I don't think. And the other thing that happened is church was a little different. It was organized differently in terms of what we did during the day. Priesthood was held at like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. It seemed like 8 o'clock. And then when it was over, everybody would go home and get their families and bring them back for Sunday school about 10 o'clock. And then that would be over at about noon, and everybody would go home and eat dinner and come back at 4:30 for sacrament meeting. And so we had a lot of visiting time. In between priesthood and Sunday school, some people would stay at the church and they would visit. In between Sunday school and sacrament meetings, some people would stay at the church and just sit around and visit. Or they'd come early or whatever, and there was a tremendous amount of visiting time where we would just stand around and talk to each other. And we got to know our ward members really well, and everybody appreciated each other, and I think we became close as a ward. And really, you know, because it was us against the world. We were, like I say, about 15% of the population of the town. We were trying to live the gospel. It was kind of a rough and tumble town. And I think that contact and that friendship that was built up by having so many just hours and hours of visiting was really helpful in keeping people strong in the church. And that's why I think people liked it. I think that's why people stayed strong in the church. I think that's why people that, when they decided they were going to be good members of the church, were good members and did their very best. And